I read The High Sierra, a love story by Stanley Robinson. This is nonfiction book. It's the first time that I've read it. I picked it up for Earth Day this year. And the reason is because it's kind of about Robinson's experiences in the High Sierra mountain range, kind of like hiking. And this is typical for me because I've never been to California. I've certainly never been to the Sierras, and I don't know much about them, and I don't like hiking very much. And so this is the exact kind of book that I would get because I'm a weirdo. I'm more interested in things that I don't understand or know anything about, or like, why would people be interested in doing this kind of thing? I don't understand it. So I want to read books where somebody talks about a thing that they're really passionate about that I don't care about at all, because that helps me feel like I'm more connected to that whole experience. I guess I don't need an explanation for liking the things that I already like, is how my mind works. And so I want to know why people like things that I don't like. In the title, it says a love story. And I think that the book, like on one level, I think the most obvious level is that Robinson loves the High Sierra. And so the entire book is kind of a love letter, if you will, to the place, the experience of it. But I think there are also various kinds of love stories throughout the book that have to do, with like romantic love, friendship love, and even a kind of like evolving self love, or like a looking backwards on like 50, 60 years of experience that Robinson has had in the area, and kind of like loving his past self, if you will. So anyway, I think the title works on like many different levels, and it's not necessarily supposed to be like a comprehensive scientific discussion about the area or like a memoir. Instead, it's kind of like both put together. And in the book early on, Robinson talks about this concept that he made up called psychogeography, which is probably the best way to describe the book, because it's the way in which we kind of like experience place in a mental phenomenon kind of way, in exactly the same way that like you can be doing something fun and your experience of time is like really, really fast, or you can be doing something boring and your experience of time feels like really, really slow, like time is moving really, really slowly. That would be like psycho time, I guess, if we keep with the naming convention. And so psychogeography is kind of like the experience of a place, and how that has something distinct from it, from the actual place, physically, versus other places, like if when he's at places that are not the High Sierra, they just feel fundamentally different to him than being in the High Sierra. And I think the book is capturing what he means by that, the way in which for him this place is different, and kind of drawing you into that experience that he has when he goes there, and helping you to feel the same thing about it. And he talks about stories from when he was little, like 10 years old, going out there with his buddies, and some of his friends remained with him going up there again and again for decades. And so it's a real touchstone for his entire life, but also for the relationships that went throughout his life as well. And I think he kind of turns that relationship around on the place itself, and talks about the ways that the High Sierra has influenced the history of the region. And so kind of talking about the ancient geology of the region, like the glaciers, how all of it formed in the first place, and then the indigenous people who were there napping obsidian stone into spear points and arrowheads, and then the way that the settlers and colonial settlers interacted with the place and its history with San Diego and Los Angeles and throughout, the 18th, 19th century and the 20th century now. And so in the same way that the place is a touchstone for looking back on his own life, it's also a touchstone for looking back on the history of the continent and the region. And that allows him to fold in some interesting science and geology, but also the kind of way in which the region fits into society, and not just human society, but kind of the natural animal society as well, because Robinson's approach includes the actor network theory of Bruno Latour, which is the idea that non-human things, animals, places, ideas can have a co-equal relationship with humans when we're talking about mapping the influence of the natural world on human society and also the global environment. And so this place has had, just in its presence and its history and everything, has had an effect on the people and animals in the region that he takes seriously as being kind of like co-equal with human society and the human individuals who have visited it throughout time. And so I think that's part of the other reason for calling it a love story, and not saying that like in a joking way, but actually really meaning it, because he has a deep respect in the same way that he would for another person for this particular place. I think the book is also in dialogue with a lot of other writing, which he cites quite a bit throughout the book, that's like other writing about the High Sierra that is also nonfiction and is, by other amateur hikers and non-academic geologist type people, rock hounds and whatnot, just nature lovers in general who have written about the area and that he has read and takes seriously. And this is kind of him chipping into that entire genre of writing. Like I said, this is not really my thing. And so at various times it was difficult for me to connect to it. A kind of weird thought that I had early on in the book is that he's talking about his friends that he went out there with as a child, and the way he just kind of offhandedly says, oh, and then this guy grew up to be a criminal defense attorney, and this guy grew up to be like a molecular biologist, academic, and this other guy grew up to do this professional job, and then he grew up to be a professional science fiction writer, and on and on and on. And he's about the age of my father, and it just like caused me to reflect a little bit on the ways in which, my dad growing up had two brothers, and they're both dead and gone now. One of them, the youngest one, died in his 20s, and all of my dad's childhood friends didn't have much of a career that you could say something like that about, and fell out of his life anyway. And my dad had a more blue collar job, not much of a career, really rambling around, hitting the reset button over and over. And I have manual labor jobs where I'm doing much of the same, of just being in entry level positions and stuff. And there's just something there unconsciously, I think, about class and doing this kind of leisure activity for fun that, none of these guys are doing the kind of work that's like what people would call backbreaking work, or having to even think about like what if you go out there. He talks about like at various times they go out there and then like, oh whoops, I broke my finger really bad, or I took a big gash down the leg, and that was a crazy story. And that's something that I really think about in how I spend my spare time on the weekends and stuff, because if I hurt my body, then I destroy my ability to make money. So like that's a serious problem, and it's part of the reason why hiking is not attractive to me at all. And so I guess what I'm saying, I don't feel like any resentment or anything. I don't want to come across like that, but that this is not the kind of thing that working class, blue collar people do, because it's economically risky, and it's the people who are into it might just be in a different class. And so we wouldn't fit in, I guess. It just feels like something from a different world in a way that, to me, Robinson's work, as a science fiction author, is like often on a different world. And this felt more removed than a lot of other stuff from him that I've read that is actually like on different planets and stuff, even though it's right here in the United States. Definitely something that I could experience, and that I feel like he does a good job of drawing a picture of, so to speak. I mean, there are pictures in the book too, but you get what I'm saying, I think. Even though it literally is, I can't imagine spending my time this way or knowing people who would. And yeah, it just feels like different class of people do this kind of thing. The other thing that I felt in the book is he talks about one of his lifelong friends at various times who he looked at as kind of a hiking guru, if you will, who gave him kind of an ethos to always be moving, to not be, like you're burning daylight kind of a situation, to pack super duper light, to not carry water, and so on and so forth. And whenever he talks about this guy, like all through the book, and it's sprinkled like literally through the entire book, he always talks about him in the past tense. And he doesn't do that with everybody. There are other people that he talks about in the present tense, because it could feel through the whole thing that there was some kind of loss that was coming as he moved in a, kind of linear way through his life, starting when he's a child and moving through his 20s and then through his family life and now into his more retirement type age. And I think there's a way in which the book, in terms of being a love story, is about the love for this friendship and everything that it gave to him, and the way that the place was a medium for their friendship to exist in, but how the friendship kind of played out over time. And for whatever reason, this guy's heart hardened, and the hiking was a part of that. And the ethic that he had, the way that he was so hard on himself and so resentful of his friends for not being equally hard on themselves, even though Robinson seemed to deeply take in that ethic and try to live up to it, it was never enough. And then eventually his friend gets a chronic disease that kills him, but he refuses to see Robinson because the friendship has been over for years at that point and doesn't want to say goodbye. And so there's a way in which I feel that the book is his way of saying goodbye, that's a part of it. I mean, it's not the whole thing of it, but it was a subtle thread that I definitely felt the weight of it all the way through the book. I could tell right away. early in the book. I remember like the way that he was talking about him, the past tense that he was using. I was like, oh, something is happening with this guy. This is something emotionally weighty that is going to come to a climax by the end of the book. And so it just felt like part of the point of the book was to explore his feelings around that relationship, but also kind of have the book stand in as a type of memorial to their relationship. And there are many other relationships that are explored throughout the book, friendships, his relationship with his kids, his wife, his ex-wife even, which is a different woman, and with his writing, his childhood, on and on and on. Even like total strangers and the delight of like meeting new people out on the trail. So I don't want to make it sound like the book boils down to this one relationship. And like I said, it's pretty subtle. But for me, I felt the impact of that particular dimension of the story. And it's really wide ranging. It includes stories from the Swiss Alps. I mean, it kind of goes all over the place. But it's a really thoughtful, passionate portrayal of a place and a meditation on the importance of wild places in American life, but also in the culture of fighting climate change that we're going to be moving into for the next century or so. That's going to kind of determine going forward if we're going to trigger a mass extinction event or find a way to harmonize human society with this planet that we live on. And so the book, I think, manages to reach beyond even the experience and the kind of up to the minute time that he wrote the book. It reaches into the future and makes us think about what our place is going to be going forward as well. So it's a valuable book to meditate on in lots of different ways. And I'm sure for people who love the area and love hiking, it would be especially powerful.